And I saw, do I see Mike? Oh, Mike's gone. I saw him around somewhere.
Yeah, I'll just go and grab it.
He doesn't have to be here, but he will be eventually.
Right, Ricardo's ready to go.
Right, we'll take her up. Good morning, everyone, and a pleasure to open the council meeting today for the 22nd of March to reconvene at the conclusion of the Finance and Assurance meeting, which will. So I'll just kick off with the karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia makinakina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, ihi akiara te atakura, he tio, he huka, he ho-hu, ti hei, the order. Cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south, let the breeze blow over the land, let the breeze blow over the ocean, let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened air, a touch of frost and a promise of a glorious day. Just a reminder that we should keep our phones on silent, earthquake drop cover and hold, evacuate out of this Bay Street, and just that these proceedings are being recorded for the purpose of live video, streaming and downloading, so by remaining in this meeting you consent to being filmed by viewing of the public. So I'd like to move that we adjourn the council meeting to the conclusion of the Finance and Assurance. Do I have a second for that? Thank you, Councillor Menzies. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Carried. I'll hand over to Bruce.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Rob. And it's also great to be here and now convene the Finance and Assurance Committee meeting for the 22nd of March. So look, great to be here, and thank you for the karakia. I think actually the sentiments of that are relevant for us as well as we get into our meeting. So firstly, I've got a couple of apologies, one from Tom and one from Margie. Are there any other apologies? Yes, Rob?
Councillor Duffy as well.
Oh, Paul's not here as well? Right, okay. Folk place today, are they able to be here today? Right. Okay, well look, let's, I'll move from the chair that Tom, Margie and Paul's apology be received. Have a second, please. Yes, appreciate that. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. I haven't informed any leaves of absences. Is there any matter coming up in front of you today that you need to declare an interest? I do, so I'd just like to inform you of two. They both occur actually inside our public excluded. Paper C8.2 dealing with our O&M contract for Three Waters. I'd just like to acknowledge that you have received a report prepared by Morrison Lowe. I used to work for them, but actually I'm also currently doing a piece of work for them into the impact on local authorities in the North Island in terms of the cyclone. So I am working at the moment. I've considered whether that should exclude me or not from the discussion, but I don't believe it does. The primary issues within that paper are ones which aren't relevant directly to the work of Morrison Lowe. I'd also just like to acknowledge in paper C8.3 where we're dealing with our waste recycling contract that I chair the ICC Risk Committee. Who are in effect the other party in that discussion. Again, I've tried to consider, do I have an interest that would bar me from discussion? I don't think I have. This is not a matter that's come in front of this committee at all, any shape or form yet. I feel comfortable being involved with that and ensuring my independence. I put that there in front of you. If anybody wanted to make a comment, you'd be welcome to. Otherwise, I would propose to continue on both ways. I'm open to your advice. There being none, I wonder if I could just ask that they be recorded as my interests. I appreciate that.
Yep.
If at any stage I feel uncomfortable or you do, I'll let you know. Then you can let me know too. Are there any extraordinary urgent items in front of us? No. So we have the minutes of our last meeting, not so long ago on the 15th of Feb. Are there any comments, questions, corrections that people noted in these? As always, it looked pretty good and pretty much like the meeting I was at. So I'll move from the chair. We accept these true and correct record. A second, please. Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. No notice of anybody from the public looking to speak to us. last meeting, not here, but elsewhere I did, so there we go. Right, reports. We're into 7.1. Who's taking us through 7.1? Therese, welcome. Well, Teresa, salient points to be appreciated. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr Chairman and Councillors. I'm presenting the Finance and Insurance Work Plan for June 23. I take this report to be read. The following reports have been added to the March meeting: the Recycling Acceptance Service Report, Renewal of Operations Maintenance Contract, and the Debenture Trust change of external audit provider. The following reports have been removed from the March meeting. Setting the 3-year internal audit program has been removed from June. The Debenture Trust Limited Independent Insurance Report has been moved to June, as the limited insurance engagement will be completed subsequent to the signing of the engagement letter. Unbudgeted expenditure and impact on rates has been removed, and the internal audit terms of reference has been removed until discussions on the internal audit program is undertaken. I ask that the committee receives the work plan and notes the changes made. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, for a very efficient report. Well done. Any comments on the planned work program? Just check. I didn't have a chance to look at my diary. Is our next meeting the 25th of August? Holiday. Finance and insurance meeting?
June.
7th of June.
Okay, so I thought we don't have a June column. Sorry, that's fine. I should check that.
Yeah, no, we do. It's over there.
Oh,
This isn't next year's work plan.
Show me, sorry, I was on the wrong page, no wonder. Oh, that's right. That's a good start to the meeting. Oh, heaven help us. Okay, that's cool. Look, I'm comfortable. Any comments folks would like to make apart from my faux pas? I'll go back to correctional training school for how to read a paper. Anything else, guys? It all makes sense to me. Can I move to the recommendation, please, which is that we receive and we note the changes. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Christine. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right, we start dealing then with the management report. Now, welcome. And Mike, can you come forward too, please? It would be good to have you along with Robin with the absolute superb. I have indicated, Mike, to and to Fee that in the course of the meeting I'd like to have time, committee-only time with you. And I realise I haven't organised this, so I'm just going to do a very quick administration here, Fee. How do I achieve that? It's not going to upset you.
Well, it won't upset me. You'll want to have it at the end of the won't you?
I'd like to have it actually at, yes,
Or do
probably
you want
prime.
to have it more
Actually, what I would really like to do is I'd like us to do and work through Mike's draft management report because it relates to the annual report. Then hold the resolutions off because we then actually have the draft annual report to consider, and I presume your feedback on it. Then I'd like us to pass the resolution to move into PX, gives me a chance to have that committee only time with Mike. Then when we come back in, I'd like to deal with the resolutions in each of the two papers. Can you handle that?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Good. Here we go. Thank you. Jan, you happy with that?
Happy.
Sweet. I got the two people that counted my life happy. That's not bad, is it? Right. Okay. There we go. So, Robin, your hands, I suspect.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. So I'm here to present the draft Deloitte Management Report for the year ended June 2022. I'd like to introduce Mike, Audit Director for Deloitte, and Mike, as you've said, is here to provide an overview and answer some questions. The purpose of the report is to present to the Finance and Insurance Committee relating to the audit for the 2021-2022 annual report. I will take the report as read, however, highlight some of the following. Overall, from staff perspective, this is a good audit report that provides council and public assurance over the information within the presented report. Overall, also Deloitte felt the statement of service performance reporting was high, of a high standard, and any discrepancies of data that require changes have been complied with. On note point 18, Deloitte have noted 2 internal control findings. These are not significant and staff agree with both those findings. Now ask Mike to discuss.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate that. And again, welcome to the meeting, Mike. points would you like to make about the report, please?
Yeah, look, thank you for having me for a start. And look, I'll take our report as read. A couple of things I would just comment on. At the time we wrote the report, you'll see that was dated on the 8th of March. And so we have managed to largely complete the audit procedures that we need to in order to provide the committee with assurance that our work is largely done. There's a couple of administrative areas that we are still just finishing off. Those areas just relate to under the drinking water standards performance reporting, we're required to obtain approval from the Office of the Auditor General as to the work that we've done. We see that as largely administrative, but that is happening in the background. We don't anticipate any changes as a consequence of that. The only other outstanding item is the committee may be aware that last year the financial statements had a qualified audit report in relation to certain performance measure reporting, and that was largely related to call logging and call wait times. Those have been resolved in the current year, and so we're able to issue a clean opinion in relation to FY22 for those matters. The only thing we're seeking clarification on from the OAG is whether we need to carry forward that reference in the audit report related to the 2021 financial performance reporting. So we're just trying to get clarification from it. It won't affect in any way the 2022 reported numbers because we're comfortable that the remediation that management has undertaken has been satisfactory to meet the requirements for that 2022 period. So it's really just a presentation matter in relation to that carry forward issue from 2021. But we are hoping to have that in the coming days. So look, I guess just sort of covering off some of the high-level comments in our report. Clearly the valuations were a significant exercise in the current year. There was a material movement in the Three Waters valuation, which I think has been canvassed at length by management. As you'd expect, we had a number of discussions with both management and the valuers as well. I think where we get to ultimately in 30 June 2022 is a really good platform of information from which we can now work forward. I think some of the information that came to light that informed that valuation has been additive and useful, and I think provides, as I say, a really good platform to move forward from. We obviously also worked through the roading valuations. The impact of that was less significant, but material all the same, but is certainly consistent with what we're seeing at other councils that we're involved in. The only other matter to really call out, I guess, is the Three Waters disclosures and the impact on the audit report. You might recall from 2021, for those that were involved, there is a standard sort of emphasis of matter in relation to the uncertainty of what's going to happen with Three Water assets and councils. That is disclosed in the financial statements, that uncertainty, and as well as called out in the audit report. So we've been provided with some standard wording from the Office of the Auditor General, and that will be included in our audit report. I guess the comfort that the committee can take is that those disclosures are very much a council-wide standard disclosure. There's nothing specific to call out in relation to Southland, but it just highlights the uncertainty associated with the asset transfer plans associated with the Three Waters assets. Other than that, I think I'd just like to reiterate, the comments earlier. We were pleasantly surprised. I think this is our first year of being involved in the external audit of Southland District Council. We did come in at late notice. We're certainly hopeful that we convene a meeting at a slightly earlier stage next year. We've put in place some plans with Anne and management to ensure that is the case. But look, I think the information that we found was of a high standard, and I think I made the comment that the statement of service performance is usually the area where you can identify the quality commitment to reporting, and I think the document that we'll talk to soon in relation to the annual report evidences that. So certainly appreciated the support of management as we work through that process, and look, happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thanks for that, Mike, and I appreciate your generosity in your comments, and I think important to be heard publicly as well. Folks, our first order task is to deal with Mike's and indeed Robin's report rather than necessarily the annual report. That's the next item. I just wonder if folk have got any questions as far as the report is concerned. wondered, Mike, just really an observation, and I agree with you. The revaluation work just stands out as being significant. I don't know whether Rob will agree whether it's a question to you or to you, Anne, but that obviously has a massive impact on our level of depreciation. Roading less so, but certainly 3 Waters does. This revaluation is factored into our current annual plans.
Through you, Mr Chair, no, we haven't amended, in the past we've never amended our depreciation calculations. We leave those until the long-term plan, but we note them as potentially being different.
So this year's annual plan depreciation is based on your old numbers, not the revaluation?
So for 22-23 definitely, because we've only just received that information in this year, so that was before the plan. And for our 23-24 plan, annual plan that we're just proposing now, those numbers have remained the same as what we've had in our long-term plan. Because it's not only that, you also get the same sort of variation in roading as well.
It's not strictly an annual. It's an interesting point though to think about for your annual plan. Okay. Anything else? Yes. The clearance on the ROI stuff, that should be reasonably straightforward.
It should be.
Yeah. So when you say it's administrative, we're planning days, not weeks to get.
Oh no, certainly, yeah, and that process is underway now. Yeah. So we were hoping that we'd have it for today, but certainly should be this week.
And Rob and I noticed that, as you said, the recommendation at this stage around improvements are relatively minor, but shouldn't be a problem to deal with. Okay, that's good. Rightio. Well, that's useful. If there's no other questions on that, we aren't going to deal directly with the resolution at this stage. I'd like to move on to the next paper, if that's okay, which is the actual annual report itself, and dare I say it, the summary, which would be useful to consider in the process as well.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. So again, here to present the annual report 2021-22 to the Finance and Insurance Committee, and ask the committee recommends to Council to adopt the report on 5th of April. I'll take the report as read, and again I have some aspects of the report to highlight, and also we have Mike here with us to provide overviews and answer questions. So the annual report is part of our obligation under the Local Government Act, requiring Council to report on performance for the preceding financial year. The report considers and comments on the performance targets set against the budget and operating targets for year 1 of the 21-21 LTP. Due to significant resourcing issues, the requirement to adopt an annual report within 4 months of the end of the financial year has not been met. Legislation was passed last year extending that adoption timeframe by 2 months to December 2022. Council also received notification from the Office of the Auditor General of a change of auditor for this annual report due to resourcing challenges, and this change was from Audit New Zealand to Deloitte. So note paragraph 5 on the audit process was delayed due to availability, and as Mike said, some late notice, which means that Council is now outside our statutory timeframes, and will be adopting the report in early April. The annual report has been reviewed by members of staff, the leadership team and the Finance and Insurance Committee prior to being audited by Deloitte, and changes as a result of these reviews have been incorporated into the document. These are not significant and generally reflect inclusion of council-related entities and changing some items as to where they are recorded on the balance sheet. The final draft report and summary documents are attached to this report. Just point to also paragraph 13 on September the 28th, 2022, added Finance and Insurance meeting and subsequent Council meeting on the 5th of October, committee members and Council recommended to the incoming Council assurance attesting to the accuracy of the information contained within the 21-22 report. Annual report presented at those meetings. An internal management representation letter was signed by Mayor Tong and Chief Executive for the draft 21-22 annual report, and on behalf of Council of the day. This was as a result of audit not being completed prior to the end of the triennium. Mike, I hand over to you if there's anything else that you want to add to that.
No, look, I think it's a fair summary. I mean, I clearly would like to be signing this off at a more appropriate time next year, but I think we need to probably recognise the efforts of management to work within the constraints that we had. and certainly our involvement was called in quite late into the piece. So there's a large amount of effort, I think, from both sides that went into getting us to this point and enabling a sign-off, albeit a little bit late. So.
Bree.
Just from the financial results, these have largely remained unchanged since they were presented to the Finance and Assurance Committee in September and subsequent council in early October. Those information is on page 61 to 63 of the report. I'm happy to take any questions, but they are largely unchanged since the numbers were presented to you.
Thank you, Bree, for the detailed reporting. That's fine, and I just wanted to acknowledge the connection that you have made, which is that we did consider this report at some stage ago, but largely with the addition of the audit on top of it, it's remained largely as we saw it. There have been no significant adjustments as such, which is testament to the good first round work that you guys did, which is superb. Right, members, so a chance to make any public questions of Mike, Bree, or Robin, or anybody else. Actually, as a matter of fact, over the actual annual report, we're into the final lap, the final back. Well, in fact, we're into the home straight, I think, with a wee bit of fair wind. I just wonder if there's any questions folk would like to have on this, or observations. Actually, yes. Zero.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was just curious with the page 61 of the around the completed and in progress projects, and I don't know if this is necessarily an appropriate question for our finance people, but I was just interested to know of those projects that were in progress, which was 151 projects. How many now are completed? What percentage are now completed?
Yes, so you're talking about post 30 June 22. So how many have been completed?
It might not, as I say, it might not necessarily be a relevant question, but I think the bigger scope of what this table is having to discuss, it would be just interesting to find out now, given that it was 60% of the projects that were on 21-22, what's now complete.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'd need to just go away and get that information and come back to you on it.
I was reading these quite late, so I realised that it might not be a question that you'd be able to answer.
Yeah, but we'll obtain that information for you and come back to you.
Thanks for that, Sarah. There's the value of Mike's work and obviously our team's work, is actually we've got information now we can have the external support as being accurate. So these are the sorts of very good questions that come out, and I've got one around. Any other questions I'd like to make though? Have the summary in the back as well. Well, a little question from me, Robin and Bree, and it was actually looking at the BIA required measures. Find them now. What page are they on? Somebody help me, please. I've marked them out. Here we are. They're on. I'm looking at page 103 of our agenda. Page 37 of the actual annual report. Again, this is a bit like your question, Sarah. Now that we've got audited information, I was interested that actually we couldn't meet the essential services benchmark. We could be scurrying around the report to try and check out why we couldn't meet that, given the substantial spend and extra money coming in terms of Three Waters. And it's interesting to note that that's the case. All I just put on record is that it actually reflects something about us, which I think is worthwhile pursuing later, which is actually that says in the area of our networks, we aren't able to achieve and spend in accordance with our appreciation, which raises the question about renewals. Now it's at 97%, so the margins are actually reasonably small. My math is correct, it's in the area of $1 or $2 million. I actually thought we would have overshot this number by miles. So it's, again, the value of independently audited information. We've now got a chance to analyse it as we go forward. Not right for now, but I just want to put that out there. It's a very interesting number that we are at that level.
And through you, Mr Chair, of course, it will be the increased depreciation too, that will make a contribution towards that.
Exactly. It's a key point. It goes, why it goes both ways. It still says something really important to us about what is our renewal program, what's our ability to deliver on a renewal program. As I say, from a performance perspective, it's something to talk about with your annual plan and or with your long-term plan rather than with the annual report. It's just reflecting on past performance, and it's it seems like a relatively no number. Anything else folk would like to raise? Yes, Matt.
I've got, it's probably similar to Sarah, it's mainly the right place for the question here, but it's just following up on a query from the public, and it is written in the annual report, page 78, on the TIF funding. So it's just one of the projects, the TIF funding towards the Mahirutu Waifanga project, and was just wondering where that project is. Possibly not a conversation for here, but on that.
Through you, Mr Chair, I've actually asked that question separately around today.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a separate question, which I'm sure management can note, Sarah and Matt. I think the critical question I'd want to know is your information or your concern suggesting that what we have in here needs to change, and we faithfully represented where we got to with the funding in the years, right? 21, 22 financial year. It seems so old. Okay, thank you for that. So that's something that Anne will know, I'm sure, that we'll follow through on. Thanks for your question, Matt. Is any other questions folks would like to? Yes, just
for you, Mr. Chair. I note in the areas of audit focus what Mike had mentioned about Three Waters revaluation is highlighted there with a high level of management judgment required. And I note you qualified that other councils are seeing the similar effects on their roading network. Is it the same for Three Waters also? Are other councils seeing the same thing?
Yeah, certainly it's directionally the same. I think it would be fair to say that the quantum of change at Southland District Council is more significant pronounced than we had seen at other councils.
Would you be able to qualify that when you say we are at 102%? What are the other benchmarks you've seen around Three Waters?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but look, it's certainly not at that level. I think one of the drivers for why it was more pronounced at Southland was the lack of reference data for previous works that have been undertaken. And I think feeding into the 22 valuation, there was more data available as a reference point that then fed into that valuation. So I think other councils, and look, I'm involved in some other councils, they probably had more data that had been more frequently available. So I think their step change had been more
that curve is more.
Whereas I think here what we've had is a bit of a step change in 2022, but that step change is somewhat driven by actually the availability of data that's helped inform that valuation. So, and not necessarily having, and look, not having been involved previously, I can't say for sure, but I suspect that some of that reference data perhaps wasn't available in previous valuations to inform.
Just because when you highlight something with a high level of management judgment, the next obvious question becomes, so it is not too objective then, is it?
Look, I think
based on individual judgment here.
Yeah, look, it's always evaluation itself has a level of judgment, I think, and look, we get comfort from that by using external valuers to help inform that position. Obviously, we look at that with reference to what we're seeing elsewhere. Management interrogate that. So I think while there is a level of judgment involved in the valuation exercise, I think there's also a high degree of challenge to obtain comfort that you end up with a reliable outcome. And as I say, I think we don't necessarily have the benefit of understanding in detail 2021, but we're certainly comfortable with where we get to for 2022.
I think, by the way, we have to see management with a small m being abrasive of management of a council. It's not just Cameron and his team, and because it's their, because it's our decision around the estimate of the life of our assets and things like that. Those are all the sorts of judgments that are brought to bear. What I would want to reflect is that I think we're all doing it to our respective professional standards. So it doesn't mean to say there's something wrong with it. It's as what Mike has said, which is really good. And this is again what I've tried to express before: the benefit of an audit. The benefit of using valuers is that we get a chance to have other views looking in at us to see whether our judgments are reasonable. And I think what I'm taking of your work, Mike, and you can tell me that I'm taking too much, you've tested it. I think you used the word in your report, you've challenged us in terms of those judgments and assumptions that we're making, and you've found them reasonable, which is comforting. So we've exercised management with a small n judgment well, which is good. Any other comments? Thank you for that, Jasper. Any other comments people like to make? Right, I wonder at this stage, do I have to pass a special resolution?
Adjourn the meeting and.
Adjourn the meeting?
Yes, you need to adjourn the meeting. And we'll need to turn the live stream off.
Okay, sorry Ricardo, that's what we're going to do, mate, because I think now's the time to meet with Mike by himself.
Yep.
Okay, so look, can I will move a motion that we adjourn to enable us to have committee only time with our auditor. That's very helpful. So the role now is to then go back and deal with the papers and the resolutions that are outstanding. So if I could move us back to item 7.3, which was to essentially receive Mike's draft report. We do need to, am I the right one? No, sorry, I'm the wrong. There we are. You're right, Bruce. Sorry, I was trying to do the prior, the subsequent papers work. Here we go. So our role here is to receive the report. I thought it was as simple as that. Do I have a person prepared to move and second that, please? Thank you, John. Thank you, Darren. Any discussion on the motion? I'll put it all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Right, now we'll get to the one that I was trying to get to, which is wonderful. So we've heard through everything. We've got the annual report here. So apart from receiving the report and being comfortable we've met our obligations under B and C, we are actually, given the position that both Anne and Mike are saying the accounts are in, recommending to council the adoption of the 21-22 annual report. So when you meet as full council, we have a recommendation from us that this is good to go. We endorse the summary. We've spoken a lot about the summary, but we've all had a chance to review the summary. And if you haven't, I'm telling you it's okay. So we need to endorse the summary, and once the annual report, by the way, is adopted by council, there is a statutory process whereby the summary must go out with the audit opinion on the month of the adoption. I think is the requirement. We delegate to Cameron to approve any final amendments, recognising there could be one or two others. I am going to ask that we add to this, which is that you delegate to myself as chair of the risk committee and Cameron the receipt and review of the letter of representation and a recommendation to the mayor and the chief executive that they sign the statement of compliance, which is in the annual report, and also the letter of representation. Okay, that's just a small piece of work we need to go through. We had a discussion on that at the meeting where we considered the annual report, but we just need to make certain I's are crossed and T's are crossed on that process. So it's delegate to myself as chair of the committee and to Cameron the receipt and the recommendation that the letter of representation, the statement of compliance and the annual report be signed. That's important too for when you get to your council meeting to receive the annual report. Brilliant. Okay, so there we go. So with that, I'm happy to move that recommendation, or those sets of recommendations. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Rob. Is there any discussion on the motions? Being none, I'll put it all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. After a very good morning, thank you, and also committee time and management giving us the time to have that chat. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Righty. One other thing, sorry, and it's really just administrative, it's really just an action item. Can I just ask that we make certain that a copy is sent to both Gary as our going mayor, but who has features on it, and also to Abel as sort of holder of the finances in the previous regime, given it's got that accountability and we know the transition issues that go with an election cycle. Could I just ask that we make certain they get a copy, please? Right, can we move now on to item 7.4, which is change in debenture trust external audit provider. Brian.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Today I'll present the change to debenture trust external audit provider. I will take this report as read, but I'll just make the following summary points. In June 2022, the Finance and Assurance Committee approved the engagement of Audit New Zealand to undertake a limited assurance engagement of Council's debenture trust deed for the year ended 30 June 2022. Due to the industry-wide auditor shortage and other work commitments by the Office of Auditor General, Audit New Zealand were unable to undertake this work. As such, the OAG has appointed Deloitte to complete the engagement for the year ended 30 June 22 and subsequent years. Deloitte have commenced the engagement in February 2023 with the intention of having the limited assurance engagement report completed once Council has signed off the annual financial statements and performance information. The final report is anticipated to be finalised and presented to the committee at the June 2023 meeting. The Auditor General advised that the fees already agreed with Audit New Zealand will be honoured for the engagement for 30 June 2022, and then new fees will be entered into with Deloitte for the 2022-23 engagement. With the change in auditor, Deloitte have sent a new engagement letter that requires to be signed for the 21-22 engagement. In reviewing the audit engagement letter, staff compared it with the Audit New Zealand letter, and the content of the engagement letter was not significantly different compared to the one signed in June 2022, and a copy of the engagement letter was included in attachment A of the report. And I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Rick. So quite administrative. It was going to be done by Audit New Zealand, change in audit, it needs to be picked up. Mike, I just wonder though, I'm going to put you on the spot. In simple, plain English, tell us what you're doing here.
Yeah, this is a common audit for anyone that borrows from the LGFA. So you are a guaranteeing entity under the Local Government Funding Authority, I think LGFA stands for. So we're required to report to them certain information, which we cover in the debenture trust audit. That the information that you're reporting through to them as a guaranteeing member is correct and accurate. It's really as simple as that. We've largely done the work. It's really an administrative process now to close that out.
Thank you. So we're giving assurance to LGFA, and indeed, it's really with the debenture trust holder, isn't it? But actually, it ultimately goes to them. That we're tickety-boo. It's a plain English word. Right. Any other questions for Brew Mike? Yes, Rob.
Just on page 328, just got on there the register of stock, and it's just got 4 X's. Are there supposed to be figures in there?
No. Well, there will be.
Yeah. So they'll be
but not for the purpose of the letter. Yeah. Sorry, I answered Mike's question, but I think it's
It's really, I think it was an example of the indicative reporting. So we'll populate that, and the committee will get the opportunity to review the final report with that populated.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So I wonder if we can move to the recommendation, please, as said, is in a sense procedural to enable us to firstly under D rescind our prior decision to ask Audit New Zealand to do it, and in effect then enable Mike to do the work under the name of Deloitte on behalf of the Audit. Thank you, Christine. You're moving that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Sarah. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Assumption of a new role, Mike. Whew. That's great. Appreciate your work. Seriously, it's wonderful. And thank you for being here. Right, if I can move on to item 7.5, which is
Oh, no, sorry.
once I've got it right. There's a fair chance I could have been wrong, so that's good. Welcome back, Jane.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr Chair, good morning, councillors. So the purpose of my report is to submit the March quarterly risk management update for your consideration. So Council's strategic risks for the quarter have been reviewed by the leadership team, and any areas of issue have been outlined in the report, which I'll take as read. Of the 11 risk areas that are reported on, we've got 3 that are currently assessed as increasing and which are under active watch for the quarter. So the direct and indirect impacts of the weather events in the North Island over the last quarter are likely to be there for some time. You'll see that the resource and delivery risk has been assessed as increasing again due to the potential threat to our work programme, with resource including personnel and supplies along with central government funding being prioritised towards the response and recovery in the most affected areas. The disaster event risk has also seen a trend to increasing this quarter, both as a result of the events in the North Island and also of the extended dry spell that we've experienced here in the south. The ongoing impacts of central government reforms have been explored in detail with the committee in past reports, but I am going to make mention of it again today, just in terms of the pressure that the organisation continues under, given the complexity and speed of the changes of legislation. Lastly, I'd just like to mention the work due to be undertaken by elected members and senior management next month when you meet to undertake the strategic direction setting for the district. This is a really important mitigation which is going to be integral to the alignment of decision making for the organisation and which will help keep that strategy and direction risk at that stable level going forwards. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Jane. Appreciate that. So, current information up to date, March 2023. What is happening in our context that's affecting us in our risk? Do we have questions or points people would like to make? Jane, how would you characterise our risk environment at the moment, overall?
We're just about to undertake the whole risk reset and risk refresh, and I think that's timely. This is a good opportunity for us to be going back and looking to make sure that what we're actually doing is appropriate and is effective enough, and just making sure that we've got all of our processes in place so that we're actually can come to you each quarter with that assurance that we're monitoring effectively. Like anything, I think there's room for change and room for improvement, but I think that we're faced with a lot of external risk drivers at the moment that council as a whole is, like many other councils and organisations, are struggling to keep on top of.
Yeah, thank you. And my view would be our risk environment's increasing in its sort of potential impact, which makes everything that you're doing so important. I was interested particularly in the resource and delivery one. I mean, by the way, I agree with you around disaster events. I think there's a lot more to come out of what's happening, what we're all going through or watching going through in the North Island, and it will have a big effect on how we should be thinking about climate change and disaster recovery, disaster events. I'm interested though in what may be more immediate, which is resource and delivery. Now that's not essential, that is both our internal capacity, but I'm also thinking here about the impacts of the cyclone. And dare I say it, weather events when you can't get blinking ferries across that strait today on our supply chain. I just wonder whether anybody could comment on that in the nature of that risk, which you broadly say is increasing around procurement, staffing and work program, but I just wonder whether there's anybody who'd view. Yeah, Nick.
Through you, Mr Chair. We have spoken about with that in regards to our teams. We've been made aware by a lot of suppliers there's a risk around materials reaching down this end. We haven't had specific yet, but I would say it's coming as resources and materials are focused into that region. And as you say, we've got major transport risks when the ferries aren't running or can't get down the country. So we're hearing noise, but we haven't seen actuals yet. But we believe it's coming.
So when you say actuals, we haven't seen, for instance, price increases yet?
No, we haven't seen actual delays on actual products yet. Our suppliers and our supply chain are telling us they're bracing for it. We don't just have specifics where I can say there was 20 valves stuck in Auckland, but we've been made aware that it's sort of quite a potential for it. And obviously they've got a lot of work to do up there in the rebuild. So there's a likelihood that resources could get that way too.
Any noises out of Wakatahi?
Other than what I've seen publicly, where effectively a lot of funds are going to be heading that way. Our rating team are very aware of that and very mindful of what that may look like for the next funding round. But definitely, I very much doubt there's going to be anything spare.
Yeah. It almost even makes in our annual plan an exercise in more uncertainty rather than decreasing uncertainty, doesn't it? But actually we might find out even our annual plan is off the mark.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as you know, in our last LTP, we fought pretty hard after Wakatahi effectively reduced our funding. I think we really would need to be in a position to consider that again and what that may look like and how that may be funded to continue. Would be remiss of us not to have a contingency plan around that into a new LTP funding year.
When would you initiate that thinking around the contingency plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Ian is obviously starting to run some numbers now, and I know that Hartley has been giving it a lot of due thought, so we're probably in a position now to have to start really considering that and what that looks like, and have some contingencies in place in regards to if funding doesn't come through, what drops off the list, what is higher priority than other areas if the funding isn't available, and if the funding isn't available from Wakatahi, what is the other options that council may have to continue its works program.
Well, I'm glad you're thinking about that. It's news to my ears that actually you're trying to plan for this in front of the potential. Hopefully, dare I say it, it's not needed. I was about to say it's wasted. It's an emotive phrase, but that actually it's not needed. But I think actually it's wise for us to have that in play. Yeah, because thank you. You're entertaining me in one sense. That's what I was perhaps most concerned about at this point. Cameron, you're the risk owner of reform, and there is a lot around about reform in terms of indeed the events of the cyclone, resets, all this sort of stuff. I wonder if you could give us a snapshot, unrehearsed as this question is to you, unrehearsed on where things you see are at from this perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, the three on page 354, that table which shows the three increasing risk areas which were change and reform, which is what you specifically asked about, but disaster event and resource and delivery, to my mind, are actually all related. We are relatively constrained in as a council, we're relatively constrained in our ability to, say, anticipate things that governments might do. We're pretty much stuck with dealing with what is, not what might be. And but there is so much uncertainty coming out around some of those big reform programs and what they may end up being, even between now and the end of the financial year, for example. The amount of reform and our requirement to respond to it in terms of submissions that's certainly related to resource and delivery, but the idea of a disaster event being in our district and something that we are directly related to, we're actually seeing the consequences of a significant disaster event elsewhere, and the market potentially responding to that, the market also responding to a reasonably challenging economic set of conditions. And I see in the media about another construction company in Otago that's fallen over in the last couple of days. Those are all part of a really quite a challenging outlook, and we're just in a position where we have to indicate to the committee that actually this is, reasonably challenging circumstances in which to be charting a path forward. We have to assume that the RMA legislation is going through because that's what we've been told. We have to assume that the Water Services Act is, well, it's law. So, but keeping aware of some of the changes that are in the wind as well, but nothing we can particularly do about them other than be aware of them. But it's a complicated time. None of those, so the big reform programs, of course, have a significant consequence on the organisation should they go ahead. And you know, even for example, the fact that the long-term plan can't include three waters because that's what the legislation says, and yet any other organisation would say, let's have a think about what those options might be. I'm not keen to come to council and say we should do something that's at odds with the law. So, you know, it is a complex time.
Thank you for that.
No question about it.
Good. Well, thank you for that, Cameron. It's helpful to get that idea. So thank you. That's why, again, I go back to my sort of broader view. My idea of risk complexity just is the same. It's just the same as your point, Cameron. The operating environment is difficult and challenging. So I just think we should be aware of that. I hear your point. There's not a lot we can do. Nick's obviously outlined a level of preparedness to reprioritise if funding gets cut, which is a possible scenario. And I think that is sensible. I also hear your point at this high level. We're a wee bit receivers of the messages rather than being able to be determiners of it. So, okay, that's important. Okay, folk, any other questions you'd like to raise with either, well, thank you, Cameron, for coming to the table, or Jane, or indeed all the staff here. Okay, very useful. Let's move to the recommendations piece, which is what do we do with this one? We received the report, thank you, and we note those risks currently assessed as a significant issue for March 2023. Okay, and I think we've had a recent discussion around those, which I've focused on. Those are the increasing ones, but I think really all of them are risks that we need to keep our eyeball on. For the mover and seconder for that recommendation, please. Thank you, Jaspreet. Appreciate that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Appreciate it, Julie. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right. Yes. Health and safety update. Welcome.
The Finance and Assurance Committee work.
7.6, yeah, Teresa.
I didn't fold my system. My manual system failed me. Perhaps I should go back to get with the technology, eh? No, well, technology. Sorry about that, Teresa. The work plan.
Okay. Good morning again, Mr. Chair and Councillors. I'm presenting the work plan for the year ending June 30th of June 2024. I take this report as being read. The purpose of the draft work plan is to ensure that the reports that the staff are preparing and are meeting your expectations of the committee and ensuring that we're delivering the appropriate reports. In preparing the draft work plan, we looked at various work plans, previous work plans, and meeting content, as well as discussions with staff. The adoption of this work plan does not preclude the committee or all staff from including other additional reports, and during the coming year this work plan will be refined further. The long-term plan timetable is currently being developed, so this may change as a result of the draft plan. And there is a correction already to the work plan, because I put down for the long-term plan it was for 24-25, but it's for 24 to 2034, so I'll make the correction in the document. I ask that the committee receives the report and agrees with the draft work plan for June 2024.
Thank you very much, Teresa. We've got comments, folk. It's really, I'm very grateful that you're thinking forward, and I think it's appropriate about this time of year for us to think about that as we go into a new into a new financial year. So, members, we've got comments for or suggestions? I'm comfortable there's a good basis for us to go forward on. Teresa, you've also, of course, bring to us on a meeting by meeting basis the changes that go and indeed the additional deletions. Having said that, again, I would just ask members if there's anything that they particularly would like to see. I noticed the one thing that Teresa, I'm trying to keep my eye on is our assurance side of this committee, which is clearly through internal audit. If I'm correct, we for the current year doing the internal audit under the previous. We've got that coming up in June, haven't we?
Yeah, we're going to review the internal audit
June this year.
program.
So given this is the following financial year, it's logical that we would pick that up towards the latter part of next year, which is really important. So that'll be valuable. Insurance, I noticed here there's some of those smaller items we do, whereas the other ones are more standard. So thank you for that. I'm comfortable with that. Any other comments?
Just for clarity, I noticed there's a big gap between the 7th of June and the 6th of September. Was there a reason for clients and insurance during that period?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we meet quarterly.
Oh, okay, so there is another.
Yeah, so we meet 4 times a year, and then there's generally one other meeting just in regards to the annual report adoption that sort of sits. Because you'll see the 6th of September and the 18th of October. We have an extra one in there just purely so that we can recommend to council.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that clarification.
A risk committee would conventionally meet quarterly. Although quite rightly we're hearing from Nan 4+1 is probably around. Any other questions? Thank you for that, Matt. Being none, can I go to the recommendations, please, which is page 382. We receive and we agree the plan for the 24. I'll move that to compute. Second, please. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Cracker, Teresa, appreciate that. Let's move to health and safety update. Now I'll get Amber on board. Sorry, Amber. You might have wanted to speak to us about our committee work program as well. We would have been welcome to profit of you. Anyway, not being frivolous, but get down to the serious business of health and safety. Welcome. I'll be very keen to hear your key points, please.
Perfect. Kia ora, Chairman and committee members. I've met a number of you already, but for those who don't know me, I'm Amber Howden. I've been in the safety team here since 2021. So I take the health and safety update and dashboard as read, but I would like to highlight a few points for you. So the safety dashboard provides information on the last quarter. This is an operational employee report, but you will see there's a few sections in this dashboard where I note on volunteer and contractor activities, just because they're essential to getting our work done across the district. We have fortunately only had one injury reported over that quarter period, which was a pain and discomfort injury. I think this is a proactive report, and that alongside the number of near misses we're seeing coming through, I think is showing an increase in our maturity because we're trying to learn from these things that haven't hurt us just yet, which is fantastic to see from our staff, and we're getting more near misses through from our contractors as well. We've had 2 reported incidents come through involving threats to our staff and contractors, and we're looking at that as part of our critical risk project. But we've had an initial meeting for a project team about how we're going to manage this going forward. We also had a vandalism event, which you will see in this report here, which you would have probably seen in the media. Although this is more of a damage type event, I think essential to see that coming through as a health and safety event so we can track it, because we might in the future see that become a health or safety risk to staff, contractors or the public. As we discussed at the last Finance and Assurance meeting, to start bringing some more contractor monitoring data into our reports. So we've started to collect that data and get some benchmarking to see where we're tracking in that space. You'll see that's only been in the last quarter. That data is coming through quite manually, but I hope to get that improved as we go forward. you'll see a comment in the dashboard with some reports coming through from our Health and Safety Committee. We meet every second month with a representative from all of our activities around council. And the feeling that's coming through from the committee is that there's a lot of staff under stress and increased stress and fatigue due to resourcing, due to external audits that are happening at the moment. So I went back to them and said, how can we improve this as an organisation and what can we do to help? So we're working on that. So we have also, as a project, done security reviews across our offices and libraries in the district. This supports our work in our critical risk space on personal harm. And we looked at things like escape routes, support available for our staff who are working alone, and this will form a report going to the leadership team in the next week or so. So thank you for your time, and do you have any questions?
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that, and thank you for the improvements that we're making gradually, and I don't mean critically, but gradually to the reporting that's coming to the committee. That's great too. Real clear questions. Sarah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, on the dashboard, you've got the number of LTIs as 1, and then the lost days 55.5. They're correlated? So that 1 LTI has resulted in 55.5 lost days?
Yes, although some of those lost time days were a flow on from an LTI from the last year as well. So the sorry to clarify, the LTI is the injury.
Yeah.
So we had 1 LTI last financial year, and we've had 1 so far this financial year.
Okay.
That's the time off from those injuries.
So that's what I was trying to reconcile, was the pain and discomfort didn't result in the 55.5. Thank you for clarity.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah's just addressed my first question, but the second is I'm struggling to see how the vandalism report relates to health and safety. Is this about removal of the vandalism that has occurred through art or whatever is on buildings? What's the health and safety aspect from our perspective?
So we do track it as it could correlate to why these are happening in our district, and we're putting staff in those situations to staff or contractors to potentially remedy this. And if we've seen an increase in these events across the district, then it could mean that we need to look at some health and safety controls in that place, in that area, just to protect that equipment and protect the staff that are working around that.
Through Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if in the report is the one we're thinking of, but we did have one where obviously a toilet was spread with very small nasty, and obviously then we had staff that had to go out and other contractors that had to go out and actually deal with that and clean all of that. So it does become a health and safety matter when we're having to expose our contractors and staff to that sort of cleanup. That would be typically where we would record something relating to health and safety versus just tagging. Or if they've broken something, or malicious damage that could be, we've had other things like handrails kicked over or broken, where again that while it's a vandalism act, it creates a health and safety element until it's fixed or resolved.
I also accept, Christine, that it gives a sense of the environment, what could be happening around, particularly our facilities, in which case, again, for our staff, they could be walking into something which makes it a sense of being proactive and being aware of that. Thank you for the question, Christine. Any other questions? Emma, just a wee question. I'm always interested, as you're quite rightly saying, we look back to look forward, and actually what are we doing that might stop now future harm. And I'm just looking at the managing risks, the critical risks on the top right-hand corner of the chart. and just looking at, it's got policies, standard operating procedures, reviews, etc. I'm interested in the training. Is that training at a level that you're happy with? That's a terrible question. Is this going to plan, and is this with adequate speed or with adequate attendance, that what we are saying are our critical risks is actually getting through to staff?
I think so. Just as an example, we are currently focusing on the personal harm space because of the increase in the environment that staff are in. And we have situational safety training booked in the next few days, and we've got 60 staff attending those sessions. So I think that shows that our leaders and our staff acknowledge that this is a risk that we're facing.
Okay, good. That's fine. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Derek.
Did I pick you up right in saying that, you know, if one of our contractors, one of their staff gets hurt, does that not fall under their health and safety rather than being recorded in the Southland District Council?
So that's the interesting piece which will be covered off a bit later in your workshop around the multiple PCBU relationships. So yes and no. As an employer or a PCBU, we have ultimate responsibility for the safety of our staff, as do our contractors for their own staff. But because they're working on our sites or with our staff, we have a responsibility there to work with them to make sure that there's nothing that we can do better to keep their staff safe as well. So it's a yes and no answer.
I just want to, you know,
I get combined PCBU.
Mr. Chair, obviously our staff review the interaction and the incidents and reports that come through from our contractors. If something's deemed to be of high risk or something that we believe we need to investigate, we investigate and then report that up to governance. We have a due diligence requirement to do that. We're obviously not going to bring everything up, but it's our responsibility to bring things up that may be of risk to the organisation.
And another, I've heard that from there going on, you know, I guess one of my frustrations is when it comes to roading is traffic management and the amount of red cones. I mean, sometimes I forget what it said it costs Auckland City is millions of dollars, but you know, I guess there's got to be a happy medium between productivity and getting the job done and overdoing it, I suppose.
Through Mr. Chair, it's been an ongoing, I guess, battle for some time around different levels of traffic management. I know Hartley's in the room here. I know that his team had submitted when a lot of the updates were done around practicality and the like. I'm unsure where that probably got to, but traffic management continues to be one of those areas that can be a bit of a battle, but we try to do our best.
Any comments you'd like to make, Hartley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I suppose, further to the next point, we did submit on it. I know council or previous council, there was quite a lot of discussion on that and submissions also put through. There seems to be an ever-changing field over the last 2 years in particular, both around the training and the standards. The likes of WorkSafe themselves have released documents around traffic management and working on the road. But it's an ongoing, as Nick sort of alluded to, it is an ongoing area, I suppose, of discussion and development. Some of those new guides that they were talking about haven't come to fruition yet. They're still a work in progress. It's still a watching brief, so to say.
Thanks, Hartley. Appreciate that. Thanks, Derek. Any other questions? We move to the recommendation, please, which is that we receive the report. Christine? Where you two? Stay there, please. Thank you, Derek. Put the motion in, please. All those in favour, please say aye. And those against? Nick, I understand that's your last meeting.
Yes, correct.
The last item you'll talk to.
Yes.
Yes. And Amber, have I heard it right that you're also leading?
Yes, I am.
You speak to. So, look, just wanted to thank you both. Amber, probably more recent, but you obviously been around and you've been doing good work inside the health and safety. I really appreciate that. Nick, I'm very conscious you picked this one up to provide a bit of leadership as well as your other areas inside the organisation. So, Amber, great to have you. Nick, you've been a regular attender, and I'm incredibly grateful to both of you for what you've given this committee. And it's Well, I hope your colleagues are giving you a better wishing it off than I am, but I do wish you well for the next steps in your lives. It'd be great.
Thank you. Yeah. Always a pleasure coming and talking to finance insurance.
There's nothing to be worried about, is there? But you can send that message back out there where absolutely. Okay. Great, thank you very much. Right, could I move to item 7.8? Am I allowed to move to 7.8? I haven't missed the number out here. No, good. I'm going okay. Right, interim performance report, and Shannon. Oh, and Rob, good. Great to have you guys. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. I will take this report as read. So this report presents the results of the second interim performance report for the financial year for information. So just for this period is from the 1st of July to the 28th of February. And listed in the reports are all of the key performance indicators or KPIs, the agreed targets and the results of those targets for the reporting period. So there's a total of 58 KPIs, and the results at the end of the year will be included into the annual report. For this reporting period, the results show that 76%, 44 were achieved, 16% or 9 were not achieved, and 9%, 5 were not measured. In the report, we've listed the reasons for those 9 KPIs that were not achieved, as well as a table in paragraph 24 with further information around those. We have some staff, some activity managers here and group managers and myself, and we're happy to take any questions you may have around the report.
Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate that, and thank you to the rest of the staff that have come here and participated in questions, which is good. So, committee, do we have questions for them? Yes, Sarah.
Page 397, it says, how are people dumping waste into containers instead of using the transfer station? What do you mean by containers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would presume that would be the recycling containers.
Through you, Mr. Chair, from what I understand, there's been some contamination into some of those containers.
Instead of taking directly into the transfer station.
Yeah, so they're basically putting their rubbish into those recycling containers that you have, like on the way.
I mean, again, this is probably a question not for Robin, but is that reflective of the time that the transfer station's open, the availability of the transfer? Oh, sorry. So I was just questioning the people dumping waste in the containers instead of using the transfer stations, which means that the recycling is diverted to landfill. Do you think that's indicative of the actual time that the transfer station's open, given that it's only 2 till 6?
Yeah, but they're 24. A lot of those transfer stations are 24/7.
Sorry, could you speak up, please?
I'm sorry.
Tiona's not.
But they've still got access to the containers outside. That's what they mean.
No, but what I'm saying is, do you think that it's the time that the transfer station is open is indicative of the reason that people are dumping waste into containers?
That's part of it. Part of it's just straight out laziness and that education factor that we'll hopefully touch base on a little bit later. Talk about the recycling.
Sarah, you more questions?
Yeah, I had another question. I'm just trying to find where it was. It was regarding the non-notified consents and not achieving those within time frame. It did that paragraph, which I now can't find right now.
Through the chair, I think it's 397. Page 397.
Thank you. There was a comment. There was just a comment around one of the reasons being the increased complexity in the applications. I just wondered, what ownership council staff might be able to take around actually making sure that the process was correct and that all information was asked for in one go rather than it being a piecemeal type process.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I can answer that question. Marcus Roy here. So effectively, we've been working quite hard with the industry to improve the quality of resource consent applications, just to try and get all the information in the first instance when the application is lodged without having to go through request for further information and get more detail. So there's certainly quite a piece there where we're engaging with the industry on improving the quality of consenting applications. We're just seeing more and more applications pushing the envelope a little bit too, so getting more complex and seeking more breaches of the district plan, so that's adding more complexity into the consenting process.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Christina?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question following up from Councillor Graney's question around the dumping waste into containers. So just an example I was thinking of, I don't know whether this is what you're meaning, as I drive through Athelstane on a Monday morning, I see those rubbish containers, chocker, with the lids open. Are you meaning that people are then putting further waste into the recycling bin, which is beside it, because there's no room, or are we talking about different containers?
Airfill's actually under transport. I don't know if we pack up. There'll be the containers that are the recycling containers, and there's the sort of domestic containers. I'm trying to think of what's at Ethel actually.
I just wondered if that was an example. So instead of using the red bin, because the red bins are full, they're putting it into the yellow bin, and that's what's meant by...
It could possibly be, but we can't. It's hard to police. So unless you're there seeing it, you don't really know what's going on. So they're out in the... What's the want of a better word? When it gets... You don't know it's contaminated until it gets back to the recycling south centre, and that when they unload the truck, then they see it, they pull out the contaminated material. Sometimes they'll be fine, other times there'll be contamination. But I think it's an element of all. Bins full, times, the number of tourists at certain times of the year has an impact, as it does down the coast with the Catlins, with the number of motorhomes that go down there, all of a sudden it goes up. So
that's what's meant by that comment. That's we need to look at.
Well, I suppose levels of service or something.
Thank you for that. Yes, Derek.
Oh, I just think people are late. I think we've had the same trouble in Tuatapere where people just tend to dump all their stuff, old bikes, whatever they like, just open the back boot and just dump it at the recycling centre. So I think it is laziness. And
yes. Again, goes back to Grant's point about laziness, and actually it's our community as well as also where I come from. You tend to want to blame the tourists, but actually you're saying that actually it's us as well, which again is the value of this information. So being subject to that, which is actually here is an issue, and I think you've got a level of service discussion, or how does the level of service work when it comes to your LPP. Yes, Rob.
Thanks, Bruce. Just further to Sarah's question, I'm assuming Marcus is still there.
Yep, he's still there.
Cool. Just in relation to the district plan, the resource consents that trigger district, the district plan that triggers resource consents, are we tracking the sort of consistency of if we're getting a particular repeat item that may trigger the need to change the district plan? Like, are we actually tracking the number of occurrences of a particular breach of the district plan that's triggering that? Sorry, I'm not articulating my question very well, but hope that makes sense.
Yes, certainly through you, Mr. Chair. We do track that, and we track that through the district plan effectiveness report. So it's not necessarily a month-to-month review of what's triggering consents, but every 3 to 5 years we look back and go, okay, how many resource consents have been triggered in the preceding few years. What was the main consent that was sought? What is the extent of the breach? Is it a high proportion? And is it actually a problem with the rule framework in the district plan? And do we need to intervene and change that rule framework to change the context to make it trigger less consents, or is there, in the same instance, a whole lot of things that are occurring in the district that don't trigger resource consents that potentially need a level of oversight and regulatory intervention from council? So we do that district plan effectiveness process as a way of making sure that the district plan is sitting in the right context and capturing the right threshold of plan considerations and development, but certainly not at a month-to-month or interim performance reporting level. It's more of a 2, 3, 4 yearly approach.
Thank you. Sarah?
So to follow on from that, how often does or do council get to see that report? And if they do, how, when was the last time that report was brought to the council table, so that potentially these issues can actually be addressed?
Certainly. So the previous one was, we did an interim performance report. I think it was year 3 of the last LTP, so possibly 2.5 to years ago, 3 years ago, we did a district plan effectiveness report. I believe it's on the website, but if not, I can certainly make sure that we can circulate it to councillors and get it on the website. So I'm happy to take that action and get that out to councillors for their review.
Thank you. I think that would be good.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions for the assembled team here? And again, I want to express my thank you, Marcus, by electronically by being here. It's great to have you guys here. I have a couple of questions that I'd just like to just ask about. And again, by the way, good reporting, Janet. You can't get past the exceptions, but it's some obvious not a bad thing to look at. I was interested in the library level of service reporting, which I think, if I got it correct, it's saying that one meets the level of service criteria. I think by implication 6 don't. That's interesting. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but clearly something's short of what we intended. I wonder if I could get a comment on that by anybody.
Can help provide that comment.
Yes, thanks, Fred.
So the Winton Library does meet the standards. The Tiano one is close to meeting the standard. It has most of the functionality that's proposed there. However, it doesn't have the back office or the staff actually included in there. There's actually a separate building, so one could say actually it's extremely close to meeting that criteria. And most of our other libraries are in the process of being looked at whether or not they are suitable to meet those criteria. Some of them are small, they go from quite an extreme from being quite minimal space to obviously the Winton Library, which has been just recently refurbished. So we're looking at those libraries as we can get money available to do those. So the long-term plan is obviously a key for doing up the next library that comes on board.
Thank you for that, friend. It's what my assumption was. And again, I want to say thank you for honesty and transparency that we aren't meeting our own set standards, which of course is obviously the received service of our ratepayers. So it's actually really interesting. So look, I'm glad you've said the words of what it must presumably be picked up in terms of the LTP. Shannon, I think you wanted to say something.
Thanks, through the chair. I just wanted to add, just in relation to that KPI and the last long-term plan, the target was increasing every year. So we have 7 libraries in total. So that was our aspirational target, so that by the end of the 10-year period, that the libraries had met those criteria level of service standards. So just a little bit more background for information.
Sweet. By the way, you just used the word aspirational, and it raises a very good question. Sorry, I'm before today. It does raise a really good question to answer as a council. with the LTP, which is actually aspirational versus actual what the realistic will be. So thank you for that. I appreciate that advice. Look, and the other thing, and I mean, in some sense, we covered this under risks. That I noted the increasing pressure on the resealing program. I think I've got that correct. Yes, the maintenance under 12.3. How do you hear? Is there anything you need to comment? We're starting before under our strategic risks, the impact of the supply chain, etc. Not that that's necessarily evidence of this, but clearly challenges to keep up the coverage.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I suppose it's sort of highlight or touched on last time with the committee is it is just ongoing cost increase pressures across the board, really, from through all of our suppliers, whether that's bitumen, fuel, then fuel itself. And so from a budget point of view, we get our 3-year allocation from Whakakotai, and it's pretty much fixed. And I sort of touched on earlier the implications, I suppose, of the events up north, the chances of accessing any more funds, so pretty much zero, maybe less, at least in this 3-year period. So it does put the pressure on, I suppose, to live within our means, unless council do unbudgeted and 100% funding of activities in the roading space. But to date, that's not been something that council's elected to do. We've only done, I suppose, subsidised activities for roading, so we would get effectively 52 cents on the dollar from Whakakotai. But it does mean something has to give, and in this case, the budget hasn't changed for our resealing, but because of those cost increases, the volume of work we can actually complete is decreasing. And I suppose from a risk point of view, resealing is really, I suppose, I mentioned before, but like painting your house as a preservative measure rather than carrying out full rework. And there's also safety implications around, as we have more and more seal layers that build up, road gets smooth, so then we have to put in other measures like temporary speed reductions, etc., to try and balance that safety versus keeping the speed up around productivity, and that's where we start having to compromise if we can't keep up with the works program.
And we had that around the district, the need to limit speed from a safety perspective?
Yes, we have in places. We don't, to the best of our knowledge, we don't have any up at the moment. But in saying that, one of the other KPIs is around our high-speed data collection and smoothness, so that's being carried out at the moment. We haven't got that data back yet for this season's survey, so that'll inform and identify any of those sites that may be at risk that we will have to look at potentially signing up. We're still waiting on the survey itself being completed, but the processing of that data hasn't been completed yet.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And it raises good questions around the related nature of our performance reporting as well, so I appreciate that that's something that we should keep our eye on as well. Okay, that's very helpful, thank you. I've got my questions done, but members, again, any chance? Yes, Matt?
It's just to follow up on that same question, actually, just with the resealing. With the current position being to deliver as much work as possible within the approved budget. So if that's a 3-year budget, I take it there's kind of a use it or lose it process to that budget. So therefore, if the works don't get done, it may affect the future budget. What would be the provisions around looking at the works within that budget? And I'm basing this on I'm not a road expert, basing it on some community sentiment of, why did that road just get resealed? It was perfectly fine, it's now worse. And again, that's subjective, but multiple examples of it. What's the provisions of working in with the community boards to reassess those projects within the budget, particularly if we're looking at it with a 3-year lens? We'd like some clarity around that process and the ability to amend what the budgeted works could be and whether it can be appropriated differently without necessarily losing future funding as well.
Probably a reasonably complex question, to be fair, because it starts kicking in towards how we collect our rates as well and what's district funded and locally funded. And so for most roading activities, there are a few exceptions, such as footpaths, they're district funded activities. And so and the funding from Waka Kotai is given on a district basis. We do get audited on how we spend those funds, and there are quite a lot of rules around how we determine where those works programs do get carried out. So things like net present value calculations that we have to do, and we get audited on those from Waka Kotai to ensure their portion of funding is getting spent appropriately. So there's quite a lot of rigour around how we determine where our work sites and programs are because of those, and the implications, I suppose, if we don't follow the rules, so to say, we do run the risk of losing funding. So in terms of the 3-year window, yes, it is a 3-year block. We do get annual allocations, but we try and balance the bottom line, so to say, that we don't have too high expenditure in 1 year or too low in the following. With Waka Kotai, if we don't use it at the end of that 3-year period, then yes, we would lose that funding. To date, we've got a pretty good track record of spending all of our money, and we do endeavour to spend it all. In terms of what determines the reseals in particular, we do get the question sometimes, it looks like a perfectly good road while we're resurfacing it. A lot of the times those relate to roads that we've just rebuilt. So yes, the road has just been built 12 months earlier while we're going over and resurfacing it. The reason for that is from our longevity, it creates a waterproofing. That first seal layer that we've put on is not 100% waterproof, so we do have to come along within 12 to 24 months to give it another coat just to waterproof it and keep the water out. So yeah, there's a bit of, I suppose, not a full understanding. The other reasons for resurfacing, things like age. Bitumen over time becomes brittle, starts cracking, so you run the risk of getting water into the road, and that can lead to failures. The other reason is around the texture, so the safety element, macro and micro texture, so again quite technical, but those are all measured through some of our high-speed data, and that's around safety, so how well can a vehicle brake, and there's thresholds and intervention levels that are set, that we start looking at those. So it's got a lot of matrices that we use from a technical point of view to come up with, I suppose, which roads get done or which roads don't get done.
Is there a communication function that can be kind of shared to the community to understand that and to help elected members to try and communicate that?
I'm sure with the comms team and have a discussion with them. So it is, to be fair, it is an ongoing education. People come and go and people forget things, so good point.
You won't be consulting on your new plan, are you? But you are going to consult on your long-term plan. It's a tremendous place to be able to have this sort of communication with. So I endorse your point. It was one of the things when you were explaining that, and actually it's very interesting, but actually it also says, going back to your point, a road that to the eye looks okay, but you're saying actually when you do the analysis properly, it needs to be resealed. Yeah. I was interested actually. It was as much as when you suddenly find that you can only do 95% of your budget. How do you then make that choice and reprioritise? I don't know how much you have in the way of discretion versus the rules of it, and I hear your point about the funding, so you've got to manage the equity in there as well. But look, that's for a different date. I don't need that information now, Hartley. That's fine. Look, thank you for that. I would like to move on. Shannon, undoubtedly, I'm always going to focus on pages, whatever it is, the extensions. I do want us to all go back as a committee one page, and this is me just trying to. I'm a spin doctor here. I'm communicating. Let's remember 44 to 58 are on the page. Okay, so let's remember the good work that is also being done, and indeed, even in these areas, like your libraries, there's good work being done. But it's good to also hold the mirror up, and if there's the odd, what's the crack in the mirror, but the crack in the face, it's not a bad thing to try and fix it. So thank you very much, Becky. That's really good. Can we move to the recommendations, please, which is we received the move that, please. Thank you, Jaspreet. Thank you, Darren. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you again, you guys. Really helpful, and to the rest of the staff that were here for the questions or waiting for possible questions. I appreciate that. The financial report. Janie, welcome to the meeting. I think first time today, so well done. Put your hands, and if you could salient points, that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Yes, I am presenting the financial report for the period ending 31st of January 2023. And you will see that the changes from the previous financial report, which was December, are shown in bold. Let's get straight into it. Operating income for the 7-month period to 31 January is 1.4 million, or 2% below projection for the period to date. The key variances are explained on page 420 of your agenda. Biggest variances in the transport income, which is 1.1 million, or 2% lower than projection. And this is relating to the Steel LNG's Over Island program, the project which is under projection because we have not received the MB funding for this TIP funding project as of yet. The income will only be received once the key stages of the project are completed. The remainder of this underspend is relating to the timing of the income from Waka Kotahi for road safety, special purpose roads and state highways. This reflects the lower level of capital works completed over the New Year break, with some to be reclassified to operating as part of forecasting, which I'll get to later. Operating expenditure for the 7-month period is 2.6 million, or 4% below projection. The key variances explained on page 421 and 422 of your agenda, but the biggest variance here is corporate services operating expenditure, which is 1.46 million, or 13% below projection. Around half of this is related to the lower external interest costs resulting from lower external borrowings with the revised approach to borrowing the investment implemented. The remainder is due to a mix. We've got some lower forestry operating costs with the harvesting plan still to be approved, and lower staff and project costs in project delivery, communications, engagement, and strategy and policy. Capital expenditure is 5.5 million, or 32% lower than projection. The biggest variances here are occurring in sewage, transport, and the water supply activities. Sewage capital costs are 1 million below projection. The costs for the Winton and Manapuri consent renewal upgrades are below budget, as the budgets for these have been spread evenly over the year, as is the final works for Tiana. Transport capital costs are 1.4 million under projection, and this is related again to the lower expenditure on payment renewals and traffic services as a result in delays in the procurement process. There's also been lower expenditure on minor improvements and preventative maintenance. The budget for drainage is also under projection, and with budgets being used to offset increases in maintenance costs, particularly drainage maintenance. And this is offset by higher expenditure on sealed road surfacing, with works being carried out earlier than expected, and additional expenditure on bridge renewals with work carried forward from the prior year. Staff are still expecting that all Waka Kotahi's allocated funding will be utilised during the 3-year funding period. And finally, water supply capital costs are 1.25 million, or 54% under projection, and this is largely a result of the phasing of the projects in Eastern Bush, Manapuri, Riverton, and the AC pipe renewal in Tiana. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Janie. Appreciate that. What do you think about in the way that Janie's explained this actual outturn, with also projects and actions, physical actions that deliver the service? Any questions for Janie, please? Yes, Sarah.
Janie, you might not be able to answer this question. I just had a query on page 8 with the pipe renewals in Tiana and Manapuri. What's AC stand for, please? And where is those pipes?
Asbestos concrete pipes.
Oh, right, okay.
So we've got a replacement program. We've been doing quite a lot in the last 2 years, and we actually had a very good replacement program with stimulus funding. So a wee bit in Tiana to do around, I think it's Cleedale Street and Duncan. It's 3 loops in that area. So I think with the funding we've got, we'll get 2 done, possibly not 3. We just had a conversation about that a couple of days ago, and that's not too far from the market. Oh, it's actually what we're doing. We're doing it through our panel process, which we use with the stimulus. So we're just finalising the costing on that now.
I'm sorry, what runs through those particular pipes?
It's water. Yeah.
So I've got this following question. You mentioned stimulus funding. We should have that spent by a certain time.
All spent.
Pardon?
It's all spent. And we have it by, well, it moved actually. We originally had to have it by about March or June last year, then it shifted.
And it moved to June, didn't it?
And then it actually moved out again to Christmas. But just on that, we were one of only about 6 councils that spend our money on time.
Great.
Across New Zealand.
Other questions? Sorry, I came over the top of you there, Sarah. Is there any other questions I'd make? Any folk, any other questions?
I've just got another comment, and that was on page 12, the work in progress. It's actually a very low figure. It would time of year, and I think is that project's not started or is it also a financial timing thing, just in terms of expenditure?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's just a timing thing. We generally only do our work in progress sheets at the end of the financial year. So what I would be saying is, and Joni may be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, that we will just be pulling out of that when we've completed the work.
It was just a number that stood out because it's only 10% of the unaudited actuals.
Yeah, so we're not building on it during the year. We're not putting the new stuff in. We do that once a year.
Okay.
Okay. And this, or Joni, is I'm always interested how this is reflecting on our financial management. I appreciate we're getting to the forecast in the next paper, which is important. But in terms of the financial strategy that we have as expressed in the long-term plan and our various policies, this result basically says we're broadly on track.
Mr. Chair, in regards to the project, no.
Good, keep going. That's good, keep going. That's why I'm asking the question.
So that's hence the reason why in the forecasting report you will see a number of projects that we are anticipating will move forward. As a result of that, therefore, we will not require the cash that we originally were planning to draw down, which I think was around 20 million. At this last stage, we were thinking it possibly is around 10, but it may end up being less than that. But I think we'll just go to borrow probably 10 million in this coming month to fund some of those activities.
So, yes, that's right. So not spending to save something, but equally it means literally physical services aren't being delivered in the way we anticipate, which is the real risk in question. Okay, good. I don't sense any more questions. Can we move to the resolution, please? Which is that we received a report. Can I have a mover in a second, please? Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Rob. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Jamie, thank you for that. I know about the extent of work you do with the organisation to get these to us. The lack of questioning, if there's been a lack today, is a sign that we haven't been reading it all, being very interested in the results. Good to hear where things are at. Thank you. Right, can we move to item 7.10? Joni, you're still there. So the forecast financial statement again, if you could give us a briefing, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we're there again, my favourite part, forecasting. The purpose of this report is to inform the community of the expected year-end financial result compared to the 2022-23 annual plan and to seek the committee's recommendation to Council to approve the resulting forecasted period. It's also seeking committee's recommendation to Council to approve a number of unbudgeted expenditure requests and the deletion and deferral of a number of projects. Only major changes have been included in this forecasting round. In considering the final position, staff consider what they plan to do in the 2022-2023 annual plan, the projects carried forward from the 21-22 financial year that were approved by Council on the 21st of September, any unbudgeted expenditure requests approved by Council or committees thus far during the year, the revised project prioritisation undertaken by staff in September 22, and then the expected year-end position as a result of operational decisions and information in this report. Overall, the net deficit is planned to increase from 5.2 million to 6.5 million. And this report is going to go to Council at its meeting on the 19th of April. So again, the changes in forecasting have been included in attachments A to H. A being the changes to the Statement of Comprehensive Revenue and Expenditure, B being the Statement of Financial Position, C will give you all the unbudgeted expenditure to be approved as part of this forecasting round. Attachment D provides the specific projects or items being deferred to future years. Attachment E gives you the details of the specific projects being deleted. Attachment G is approved by the CEO. And attachment H represents the work done in the services and assets area. In September last year, as a result of carrying forward $10 million of projects from 21-22 to 22-23. The services and assets team spent some time getting them to think about the timing, the doability, the carry forwards, the work, and everything that was planned for 22-23 already. And this resulted in the movement of 10.95 million of projects. This was a combination of deletions, transfers to the 23-24 annual plan, or the future long-term plan years. These were discussed with Council at a high level as part of various conversations, but formal approval to change the financial results was not undertaken, and it is planned to do this now as part of forecasting. Revenue is forecast to increase by $4.3 million due to funding carry forward, as we see, to meet some cost being moved, the funding associated with any unbudgeted expenditure approved. Additionally, this is offset by a reduction in forecasted interest earned of $1.6 million as a result of not initiating the investment approach at this time. Operating costs overall are increasing by $5.7 million. Again, a combination of carry forwards approved by Council, unbudgeted expenditure, and then further changes as a result of this forecasting round being $500,000. The key explanations are as follows. The Carrier Bay Reserve budget for routine maintenance requires an additional $60,000, and this is to be funded from the District Ops Reserve. The district water budget for unplanned maintenance requires an additional $200,000 for reactive repairs across the district, and this is to be funded by way of a 3-year loan. Additional consultant costs have been included in the water services. They need an additional $248,000 to help with the transition process, and this is to be funded by a government grant. The district sewerage forecasted an additional $265,000 for unplanned maintenance for reactive repairs across the district, and this is to be funded by way of a 3-year loan as well. Due to the investment policy changes not being implemented at this time, the finance costs of $2.3 million have been reduced by 1.7 to reflect only the interest on the current LGFA borrowings, plus an allowance for potentially another $10 million, as Anne has alluded to, that we need for the financial year. The Wheelie Bins business unit forecasted for an additional waste disposal cost of $500,000, and this is discussed in paragraph 27 of the report on page 438 of the agenda. The roading activity has included a transfer of capital expenditure to operational spend of $1.2 million. This adjustment is to cover inflation and the 3 main maintenance contracts, and the result is no change to the overall roading spend, but a change to the level of service delivered. The forecast project changes are outlined in attachment D, E, F, and H of the report. Forecasting is part of the ongoing process that enables Council to understand the end result. And this includes early identification of the projects that will not be completed by the end of the current financial year. Forecasting also provides an opportunity to approve any unbudgeted expenditure during the year, and this should reduce the number of individual requests needing to be considered by Council. Any works not started or completed by the year end will be included as part of the carry forward report presented to Council in September of 2023. Some items have not been forecasted for, as you'll see in paragraph 39 of the report, and here we are explaining why we haven't forecasted for the fuel costs for CIASA. Then the impact of forecasting on the works program is discussed in paragraphs 40 to 51 of the report, with the capital program for 22-23 being forecasted at $43.6 million. In some areas, carry forwards will still occur. In regards to the projects for 23-24, staff will be considering the ability to undertake these projects over the next 2 months and potentially incorporate the changes into the 23-24 annual plan before it's finalised by Council in June 2023. The forecasted changes will not impact the rates for this year, as the rates have been struck already. Generally, rates to repay the loans used to fund these projects are collected in the year following the drawdown. However, there may be a few instances where the projects are expected to be completed and for some reason they are not. As a result, collection of the principal and the interest may occur, and should this happen, the funds are transferred to the relevant rating reserve at the year end to be used for the costs going forward. There is, of course, still a risk that the actual result was achieved as at 30 June 2023 differs from what has been forecasted, and therefore this could give rise to overs or unders in the rating. It all depends on the circumstances. And as usual, I recommend option 1 on paragraph 62 for you to please recommend to Council to approve all the forecasted changes as outlined in this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's important to go through and we recognise how our bottom line is changing and what is the impact probably on the year end. Right, questions for Janie? Yes, Sarah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just note that there's only one community board that has requested project removal, and that I know there's been consultation on that LTP at community board level so far. Is it likely then that we'll get another round of forecasting if they are reviewing the projects that are coming up?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is the one and only forecasting round.
Right.
So,
Mr. Chair, if the community boards, so we've indicated in there a number of movements anyway that potentially the community boards already have been aware of, that we've moved from this year to next year's annual plan process. If there are other projects though that they wish to delay, what we will do with those, we'll put them into the carry forward report.
Right.
That'll happen in September. And so if they still wish to do them, but they wish to do them in a later period, however, they will still be reported on this year with an explanation.
Right. Thank you.
Janie, just through you, can you just confirm the profit there, the surplus? Because I have a feeling that the changes to the schedule have come through in the agenda. The surplus should be, I think you said 6 point.
oh yes.
And it's coming up as 8.5. I have a feeling this is a earlier version.
Right. I'm sorry, I'll have to check into that on them.
Sorry, there's a slight problem with just a couple of those attachments with the statement of financial position and performance. Yeah, we made some changes right at the end. The tables, the other tables should be all good. It'll just be those two, won't it, Janie? It'll just be for those changes.
Yes, it will only be attachment A and B. The rest are fine.
So there's an adjustment. It's $2 million, but it's not actually the sort of thing that perhaps after the meeting you could just let us know what is the correct position.
Yeah, we'll send out from amended ones, and we'll make sure that they're in the agenda for council. So that's just A and B.
Yeah. Can I just clarify, because actually one of my questions was indeed yours, Sarah, which was the Oraka Aparima Community Board had made obviously requests. Had the other community boards been given a chance to make comments in the course of this? I've seen lots of nods down the back in the course of this reforecasting process.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. When the new community boards come in, one of the first things that
like I said, Mark, they did go out and have discussions with community boards around which projects they wanted to review. We are aware that we've still got ongoing discussions with a number of community boards around which projects, even in this year, are priority for them and what might likely be next year. So there is still likely to be some change.
That goes back to Ian's basis on how this will be used and carried forward.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from folks? Yes, Rob, you were.
Just some clarification on H, where you've got the loan funding for the time period of 3 years. How is that determined for the length of the loan? Is it a standard approach, or is it dependent on the type of activity? Or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's unusual for us to have to take a loan out for maintenance projects, and so that's why it's a short period of time. We could choose any other period that council so wishes. We've chosen 3 just to try to do some element of smoothing, because otherwise we're going to end up with a very large rate increase next year. But we're recognising it as maintenance, so therefore it's not potentially appropriate for it to have a normal loan for wastewaters, which would be almost 25 or 30 years. So, but we would be more than happy to look at that if the council wishes to alter that period. We've just estimated 3.
You answered my next question as well, because it's going to be why we loan maintenance, but
yeah.
I presume it's the state of those accounts, but you've got to keep the program going. But it means in the subsequent 3 years, you're rating to pay back debt, not do work.
Although the water stuff being handed over, if we have a longer loan, it may be less of a cash flow impact before it gets handed over.
Have we had our session with the NTU?
No, that is coming up next week.
So now I'm referring you to the fact that the NTU are engaging right across the sector on the debt that will go, the assets that will go, the cash reserves that will go, etc. So people will make right. This will be wrapped up in that, I suspect. Yes, well, sorry, I was just thinking of my accounting principles, whether they would take this on board, but I'm assuming they would. Yes, Darren, sorry.
It's probably a question for Grant, just in regard to the Winton supply, water supply project that's being deleted. Just wondering if that, is it no longer needed, or there's no issue with that not being done?
No, that was around if we were waiting on guidance from the Te Mara Arawai on the fluoridation, and that's been put off through our council. We're a number of councils that if they bring that in across the country will be sort of last one on the rank. So we've taken that out. We're doing a few minor alterations to the plant for improvement and using some of that money that's dropping out.
Thank you.
That's great. Matt.
I've lost my place. Just looking at the stormwater drainage investigation for I take it the southeastern stormwater catchment in Lumsden. Thanks, Chris. I know that this was advertised in the first edition as a project back in August, I think. Noting that the upgrade itself had a $426,000 budget back in 1920, and then that's been put off, budgeted into the 24-25 at $460K. Is there a risk in pushing that investigation away from this annual plan and into the LTP when there's already the actual works pushed into the LTP? Would it be worth having that investigation done and that information ready as a handover to the entity?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I have been thinking of bringing that forward, actually. So it's on our radar with Leslie for our forecasting to perhaps bring that back into that 23-24 and get the investigation done.
I think, considering that there's...
Yeah, that's where you see the timelines of this. There's actually been quite a lot of investigation done in the past. It's really just drawing all that information together and making a decision with community involvement, etc. So I have been, Leslie and I have been talking about that one, and I probably will bring it forward. It's not too late. It's not a big sum, so probably sneak that in somewhere.
I think there's some remedial works happening at the moment, and in the meantime, while
the date keeps changing. There's also properties consistently being flooded in downpour events, so it's possibly worth just, I wouldn't like to include in that F recommendation, considering it's an investigation on actual capital works.
I'm not sure how that, through you, I'm not sure how that annual plan you showed me had it in 23, 24, and the annual plan that I had 24, 25 or whatever it was. So I'm not sure how that played out, but that's what we were going off, and that was what I was getting off the LTP for the actual physical works. So.
Right. So there's a chance that your actual plans will change what are being proposed to adopt here, correct?
For the investigation works, which is set aside about $25,000.
2580 may not actually, or may actually well be spent and not put into the bucket of this long-term plan. Okay. Any other? Sorry, you were next.
To you, Mr. Chair. Johnny, if I may ask you, paragraph 26, page 438, that 10 million that is being allowed for how much money and at what rate? The LGFA borrowings?
4.5%.
4.5% and an amount of?
Sorry, the interest.
And is that 10 million of borrowings?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it said the finance cost of this much, as just for, if you read it, it looks like you've accounted for that much finance cost.
Sorry, just send me to the correct paragraph again, please.
26.
26.
438, the very first.
Yes. So that's when I was talking earlier about the fact that in this annual plan, we were forecast to probably be borrowing around another 20 million to undertake the projects.
Yep.
And so now we're estimating that we probably will only need 10 million because of the movement of these works.
Yeah, not, just because as I was reading, it says the finance cost has been reduced by this much and we have accounted for it. It seemed to read like you are talking about a finance cost of this much. Right.
No.
Thanks. So borrowings of this much.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, we wouldn't mind seeing the finance costs going down.
Exactly. Reading at a reduction of finance costs.
Sign in the markets that that's changing at the stage, but it does go back to that point. If for various reasons we aren't able to achieve our capital plans, we don't generally need to borrow much.
Yep.
Thank you for that. So I think Christine, you had questions,
yes,
right?
thank you. Chair, just in relation to paragraph 45 with the roading program and the bridge renewals. And there's been some delay on that while discussions are happening with Tahi. And will that bridge program look different again next year? I'm just thinking about where the Channel Road Bridge comes into that process and how that matrix applies and what that means for that roading program for next year.
Thank you. So I actually started drafting up a plan before council around Channel Road Bridge. Long story short, ultimately in this current 3-year program, it wasn't on the radar for replacement. We did have it in the 3 to 6 year window, but that was on the basis we weren't anticipating obviously closing it, but it's sort of highlighted because of compliance issues. The recommendation was to close it. We'll bring a paper to council, and part of that is consideration of reprioritisation if council so wishes, and where that may sit in relation to other bridges we have on the list.
Thank you.
So just, Mr. Chair, one further comment on it. Respect Channel Road, just like the bridges we've managed to get signed off over the last few weeks. Channel Road will also fit into that. We would have to submit present value end of life calculations to Wakaputai before they release the funding for Channel Road. So there's still that hurdle, I suppose, to get through. And the same applies for any of the structures for next year.
And I think the important part of that is communication back to our community on where that sits and if you take into consideration the current bridge replacement program. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any other questions? There being none, that's good. Thank you, committee, for the way you've engaged. And this is actually a done good report, Jane, to be able to do it in mind that we are looking at actually actions that can or be taken or stopped between now and 30 June. So I appreciate the engagement. Can I move us to the recommendations? which are detailed and I won't go through, but I have just want to recommend an additional delegation at the end, and it's the and make any minor amendments. And I'm just conscious, Matt, you've raised an issue, and Grant, you may well have a change that seems minor to me. To be honest, the 20 grand goes out, or what happens to it is not going to be, shouldn't really worry us too much at the committee, but it will be an amendment. So I'd like us to be able to adopt the various essentially the various changes that are outlined in our resolution, but also recognise that we delegate to Anne. I'll give you a title, Anne, I know what it is. Boss. No, sorry, that's Cameron, isn't it, there? But thank you to the bean counter to make the final amendments for the purposes of setting this up to. So that would be a new L. So with that, do I have somebody prepared? Sounds good to me. Do I have a mover and a second? Thank you, Jaspreet. Appreciate that. Do I see that? Thank you, Darren. I appreciate that. The motion, all those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Great. That's great. Thank you. By the way, if your stomach is asking me the question, tell it to wait till 12:30, please. Right, can we a bit of check? I can see my paper folding origami yesterday. Mark, but I think we are at the point of looking to resolve move into public excluded. We have on us 3 items, which is follow-up audit action point for the renewal of operations of the renewal of the O&M contract for water and waste, and we have the recycling acceptance service. And for the reasons set out on page 453.
No conflict of interest, I assume, and no extraordinary urgent items. Right, so we have the confirmation of the previous council minutes from the 15th of February, pages 6 to 42 of your agenda. Is there someone in a position to move that they are correct? Thank you, Councillor Spragan. Seconder, Councillor O'Brien. All in favour, please say aye. Carried. Don't have any public participation. And I now move that we move the motion to exclude the public from the meeting as outlined below for exactly the same reasons as we did in the previous meeting for the 2 exact same reports from the previous meeting. Thank you, Councillor Boparai, Councillor Menzies. All in favour? Anyone against? Carried.